Mega Man Issue 19. It starts with Kalinka catching something jumping out of the ocean at the beach, and Roll tells Quake Woman to join in. I hope this doesn't last too long, because it'd be boring when it's pointless. Quake says her mother restored everything and she's just recalibrating. And it turns out Mega Man can't be here because Dr. Light wanted to upgrade him. Kalinka complains that it's too cold where her father works, and there's a storm, and Roll says it showed up early and apologizes to Kalinka for telling her to start leaving the beach. Quake notices that the cruise ship's too far inland. It hits an underwater mountain and tilts, so Roll asks Kalinka for the phone, and Oilman's called instead of Dr. Light because he's busy. He's told what happened, and somehow Oilman just greets Dr. Light instead of immediately telling him what's happened to get his attention. So he gets told not now, as suddenly the same guy who made Mega Man is complaining that he doesn't know why a part of the upgrade stops working at some modes, and needs help to complete it. Making a sentient robot is easy, but not this. Oilman asks if the ship is spilling oil as he looks at a water rescue unit, which was in a lab for no reason. So he tells Roll he'll help and brings some backup, which he somehow refers to as a date when an actual date would just be put in danger if she even gave him a chance. Right now I feel like assuming that the date is Splash Woman would be giving the comic too little credit because that would be uncreative. Roll then calls Rush and gets him to warp to her. She tells Quake to armor up because she'll need her, and she asks her what they'd do if they fall to the bottom of the ocean, and Roll naturally says they'd walk to shore and asks her why. I hate that she says never mind. The previous panel doesn't do enough to explain why she doesn't want that to happen again. I just see rocks, and there's no reason she'd think heavy rocks are comparable to ocean water when all she'd have to do under the ocean is walk back to shore to escape. They share Rush Jet, and Roll says some of the rafts weren't dropping. She tells Rush to get below and see if anyone's trapped in the ship. Roll's told the raft is jammed, and she elbows it to make it fall. So if Roll really does have super strength because she's a robot, then why didn't she break free of the chains Wily had around her effortlessly? I guess they were just that good. Conveniently, despite the fact that she wasn't recognized before, nobody really comments on how she turned out to have super strength, and just tells her there's more rafts jammed. They have to know she's a robot and just focus on what's important. Meanwhile, Quake tries to cut loose something a raft hanging by, and a noise is heard, and she falls over a railing towards the ocean. Somehow she thinks she's gonna go offline again from this, and Splash Woman picks her up and launches herself out of the water to get her back to the cruise ship. I like that the comics allowed to use robot masters from later games before the adaptation of their own game. She asks Quake if she's alright and explains that while she wasn't deployed yet, Oilman still got her help. This is less creative than him actually getting a new female character's help, but she's more useful than one. She's told there's a lot of people on the water for her to save. There's not much she can do when she can only do that one at a time. Roll takes Quake to Rush, who flies them away, and Oilman starts vacuuming the oil. He finds a raft and throws it to Splash Woman. We see that two people were holding one thing she's got, and he carries someone to her. Then he asks her if she can see the leak, and she says underwater that the damage is severe. The only way he'd hear her is if they can call each other with their heads too. Then why did Roll use Kalinka's phone to call Oilman, and why didn't Iceman have this ability? Splash plans to close off some of the leak. Then Roll gets sent over to someone with a red cross symbol on his sleeve. Good thing the Red Cross didn't find out about this and force the comic to change that, because they don't appreciate free advertising and have way too much free time. He tells Roll a bunch of boring information which could have been kept off screen and referenced by a text box in a later panel that cut ahead in time. I'd rather see something than read about it. She pulls a raft behind her in the shallow water. Meanwhile, Mega Man's able to slide now thanks to Dr. Light. Why did it take so long to make him able to do this? I guess Mega Man was a lot younger than I thought at the start of the comic. He activated him before he was the best he could be because he was so impatient. I mean, he thinks Wily's never gonna be a threat again, so why would he bother? Then since Noelle hopes her daughter isn't getting rained on, Dr. Light tells Otto to turn on the news because he's too lazy to do that himself. So all of them are shocked to see a news broadcast about Roll and her friends saving people. It's good that it made it on the news to tell everybody that the Robot Masters are trustworthy and worth it for now. I think this is my favorite issue. I always liked that the issue showed Roll in a different outfit than usual. She looks a lot better this way. I also like how her hair gets. She pulls a raft to the beach and gives someone a blanket and hugs the kid who runs up to hug her mother. Then Roll tells someone everyone but the captain is accounted for. An oil man calls her to say the captain's over his shoulder and unconscious and he's too heavy. And arbitrarily, he can't teleport a human. It's like robots get destroyed with their data being sent away every time they're teleported, and they're rebuilt by the teleport beam. Why does that not contain the risk of destroying their personal coding, but trying to modify Proto Man's core did? And why would this only apply to robots? Doesn't this mean you could instantly rebuild any technology as long as it's able to be teleported away? Couldn't the teleport beam be made so that teleporting repairs all the damage to the robot? I understand why that can't be the case, because that would destroy all the tension of when a robot gets hurt, because they should instantly repair themselves. Also, I know Sonic used the teleporter in Worlds Collide, and by human she really means organic being, because there are no Mobians here. Fortunately, it's already explained that Dr. Light's planning to upgrade the teleport system. Splash Woman's busy pulling rafts to the beach, and is going to be busy for a few minutes. Quake Woman says she'll borrow Rush and uses him to get over to the ship, drills into it to find Oil Man, and gets given the captain so that she could get flown back. Later, the captain shakes Roll's hand. Somehow, Roll says all she did was make some calls. Eventually, Mega Man hugs her and so does Dr. Light, who says he's proud of her. Mega Man calls her awesome, and Dr. Light says Dr. Cossack sent his thanks as he's holding Roll's hand and wants to clean out her sea salt. Roll says she wants to stay here to help some more, but we're not told what she means because the writer didn't think of it. And Mega Man wants to help her. The story ends with her planning to become a nurse later. It'd be nice if the final panel showed us a future version of Roll actually being a nurse. Because as it stands, we don't even know if Roll is destined to have a long life. Mega Man Issue 20. Out of nowhere, the story starts with Wily and his new robots in a convenient Kronos Institute redesigned by him, with a kidnapped, damaged Time Man near him. And he says he has a time machine, which arbitrarily has unstable energies at play. The text box says in the not-so-distant future, but at first that meant nothing to me, because Mega Man's always taking place in the future. But this has to be even more in the future than usual. Hopefully I'll get to see him find the convenient time machine and see how Time Man was taken here. Because this just has me confused and annoyed to the point of not caring. The alarm goes off, and they're told Mega Man's in the building. Wily tells someone with a stupid name, Buster Rod, to take the Genesis unit down the tower to stop him. A robot's annoyed that his unit wasn't sent, despite it being called the Mega Man Killers. And Wily says they're the last line of defense until he gets back from the future. First off, I'm not getting told why he sent the Buster unit instead of them, so this seems stupid. You'd think the unit called the scariest name would be better at fighting than the other units. Also, since he's talking about time travel here, until would mean a pretty short amount of time. Because there's no reason that he would go back to a point in time that's far enough ahead in time from this point that he'd be inconvenienced. So from their perspective, he'd go back to the future and then instantly come back. Mega Man tells Dr. Light he blasted his way into the former research facility. At least I can say it's better to have fast pacing than overly slow pacing. While I don't care as much about its adventure because I didn't see it start, seeing it start might have been boring, but I think it would have made the issue better if there was at least a few panels of that. Dr. Light tells him Wily's put the tower in a pocket of its own time with the power of the Cronus Institute, and Mega Man lampshades how overpowered that is. If Wily had brought his robots with him to before even Proto Man was made, he would have been able to take over the world effortlessly. I assume that not being able to see Mega Man get defeated was why he didn't do this. After all, I know he's sadistic because he likes seeing Mega Man in danger. He just thinks he'd still be able to take over the world even if he didn't do that. Wily says he ought to have the world under control in 40 years and Mega Man won't know what hit him. Mega Man screams, and then he sees Wily tell him to wake up already and save him from Raw Moon, who he apparently already defeated. Even though he's a device, and devices can be reprogrammed to be loyal to Wily. I guess it's always awake, so he couldn't reprogram it without it trying to stop him. And it noticed if he was trying to reprogram it, so it tried to stop him. If they're in danger, why doesn't Raw Moon instantly kill them instead of doing nothing the whole time Wily's telling him to shoot him? Why did Mega Man get sent here when he was just on his way to Wily, who was in the Cronus Institute, and Wily just left for decades into the future? He wouldn't get sent here. He'd either have to fight the Genesis unit, or if Wily sent him here on purpose, why would he make him face just Raw Moon instead of sending him to fight every single robot master he had in that room all at once? If he thinks simply teleporting him into lava while he's at it would be too quick. This confused me enough to look back at the end of issue 19. But apparently this is the next issue. There's nothing more disorienting than telling a story not in chronological order. You know what other story had that problem? Sonic Live's first story. Because part of why it was so confusing was that it started out in media res with Sally already kidnapped. And the other part was that we were told vital exposition instead of shown what we needed to know for the story to make sense. This gets me detached and so confused that I look sad for the exact same reasons. Mega Man agrees to shoot, and then there's another orange flash of light, and he asks a robot named Gamma where he came from. Why is this issue's version of Mega Man a future one that's already familiar with foes that haven't fought him in this comic yet? Shouldn't it be obvious to the writer that it'd just get the people who read this comic as attached and confused as someone who read dozens of issues ahead into a comic? The only people this could be appealing to are people that never read this comic. He avoids a punch, and there's another flash, and he notices he's in a space station. So he figures that Wily sent him to the past. He somehow doubts that he was, because he wasn't in space before, and asks why he is in space. Someone says it's destiny, and it's another new robot who says that he was only built because of Mega Man. And so I have to assume Wily's programming to make him hate him is the only reason why he hates him, instead of being grateful that he made him exist indirectly. He jumps, and Mega Man shoots, and somehow sees a door behind him without turning his head to see it. So he runs out of the room, and there's another flash causing him to confront another thing and have to run. Then he shoots through something and sees Dr. Cossack in the mecha, who apologizes and says that Wily left him with no choice. I didn't know it was in character for him to blame Mega Man for Kalinka's death. Mega Man had better end up forgetting this whole issue, because it's going to be annoying if from now on he recognizes his foes in the first meeting before he actually should. He's faced with another robot of Wily, who arbitrarily calls the guy that he's against the Protector of Earth. His Mega Buster doesn't hurt this ridiculous looking robot I don't recognize. There's another flash, and he sees robots fighting in a tournament, and himself happily watching in the audience, next to Dr. Light, who isn't enjoying himself. It seems out of character for a pacifist to watch a fighting tournament, and considering how he was so strict about raising Mega Man to hate violence, that he planned on trapping him the instant that he bragged about how fast he knocked out a bad guy, he'd never let his kids watch this. The Legend of Korra was written better because Aang's son didn't want Korra to experience the fighting tournament at first, and he didn't approve of her fighting in it. He eventually gets sent to the city where it's being attacked, and he has to shoot at Base. Nothing that matters happens, and he gets sent to a beach. He complains that Base got dragged along too, and Base doesn't know what he's talking about, even though he's still asking where they are. So why is he asking what he means? Base says Wily has stupid schemes, and they hear an explosion. Base hypocritically tells him to stop his complaining because supposedly it's childish. Even though without complaining, nothing would ever get better. So it makes no sense to label it all as childish. For one of multiple examples, if the Sonic fanbase didn't complain a lot about how Sonic looked in a movie trailer, he wouldn't have gotten a better design for the final product. Apparently he thinks we should have stayed quiet because being mature means never complaining. And women wouldn't have gotten the right to vote if it weren't for complaining. But Mega Man's complaining here can't accomplish anything, and that's the only reason Base has a point. Mega Man sees that the thing that fell was a robot and it gets warped, as well as Base, even though Base wasn't making physical contact with them this time. Proto Man addresses them both by name and tells them to help him because King is raiding the robot museum for an army. Then they get warped again, and Mega Man gets challenged by someone on a skyscraper who tells him to face his future. He says he doesn't want to be Mega Man's shadow anymore. Why isn't every Robot Master past the original ones also like this, as annoying as it is? Because this applies to all of them. Mega Man tells Base to focus, and says the light in the sky has been growing every time they jump. So if they collapse it, they could stop time warping. Base wonders if destroying them would accomplish that as well, as I wonder how Mega Man could ever collapse it. They get sent to Splash Woman, who's been taken over by Wily, and Mega Man tries to keep Base from attacking her to try to destroy her, even though he would have attacked her the same way in self-defense. They get warped to Dr. Light, who asks both of them as if they're both allies if they found the cure to Roboenza. Mega Man apologizes and says he's busy, and decides to leave the lab and fire at the flash of light, which he says nobody but them noticed. That it's conveniently at ground level now. I guess that's not something Wily planned to happen. Mega Man says ow, and Otto says that his short-term memory circuit blew. I hope this means he forgot the issue. He says he had a weird power spike. And Dr. Light wonders how his internal clock jumped ahead by years. I guess his future self took over the body of his past self. But if that was the case, he'd retain his memory of the future. So then there's no reason this error would actually mean that. It'd just be something that happens for no reason. The comic would suck if every story was like this. And why did they choose now to not have a second story? That means the whole issue is pointless. I assume people who are bigger fanboys of Mega Man who play the games more than me would care more about getting to see most of these robots early. But I don't see a logical reason to when they all have the same flat personality and look silly, so it might as well have been the same one every time for all the difference it made to the plot events. And Mega Man barely fought them anyways. This issue was about a cruise ship crashing into an underwater mountain because I guess the captain was incompetent, or drunk, causing Rold to call Oil Man so that it could get Splash Woman to start saving people from the ocean, and Rold pulls some rafts to the shore. Quake Woman eventually uses rush jets to get to the ship and drills a hole in it so she could get the captain to safety. I like that it was a story all about the main character saving people, for once, not just fighting again. And the heroes were people other than Mega Man for once. But the focus is still mostly on someone you care about because Rold's the protagonist for once. Other than the obvious fact that it wasn't quite explained properly why the ship crashed into the underwater mountain, I think the biggest problem I had was Quake Woman being scared that she's gonna go offline if she falls into the ocean, because that makes no sense. And she'd know being buried by rocks only made her go offline because rocks are solid. And Rold told her they'd just walk to shore. This issue is nostalgia pandering gone horribly wrong. as it starts out in the future for no other reason just so Wily could make Mega Man start warping through time to constantly have to face various enemies. But it's a lame excuse for a trap, because he never sticks around near an enemy long enough to actually get hurt, which would have at least given the story tension, and occasionally he's sent somewhere harmless, when Wily wouldn't do that. So either Wily didn't do this time intentionally, or he did but had no control over where he'd go. I was detached and confused the entire time because Mega Man was recognizing some future enemies. Skip this story. It's so confusing that it makes me sad and ends up being meaningless. Mega Man barely fights the Robot Masters anyways, so they might as well be cameos that can talk.